This is the Nassaumen Hockey Podcast with James Nichols and John Zella. Welcome back to another episode of the Nassaumen Hockey Podcast. My name is James Nichols, and as always, I'm here with John Zella and the official third member of Nassaumen Hockey, Joe Pantorno. What's up, fellas?
Not a whole lot. What's going on?
So I have a question, and maybe it's rhetorical, maybe it's not, and it's not as obvious as it might seem at first, but I need to know who's in more trouble. Is it Tom Wilson or the New York Islanders? Who's in more trouble?
Oh, John, I want to hear you. You're the more emotional of us here.
I don't know that that's a compliment.
That is. No, absolutely.
Or you're just looking for like hot take right off the hop here.
What does your brain tell you?
I mean, it's clear it's not Tom Wilson.
It's because right?
We didn't need to make that decision. Islander fans get to make the decision.
I said off air, I'm like, this could be obvious, but also at the same time, you sit there and you think to yourself, well, is it that obvious, right? Because we both know Tom Wilson's not in that much trouble. And actually, if you think about it even further, George Parros might be in the most trouble. So
there it is.
Maybe it was secret answer letter C. But I disclosed
that thinking about it, even right before you said that, it was. I think it's the league. I think it's the NHL.
Yeah,
I don't think it's not Tom Wilson. We know Tom Wilson's a piece of shit. That shouldn't be surprised. To
Breaking
anybody.
News.
Oh my! Capitals fans' takes on this is an absolute dumpster fire.
Pretty bad.
It's quite a hill to die on.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. And then, you've stated before, John, that you don't love the guys over at Spit and Chicklets, and Ryan Whitney made it no better with his video. I don't know if you saw it. He tweeted out a video. Oh, wow, Tom Wilson should be kicked out of the league. Now, I will say I did agree with his take on every GM in the NHL would take Tom Wilson on there.
That's not the point.
Not the point.
You can say there. I don't know. Tom Wilson's a power forward. We can all say things that are true.
Right.
That is not the point at hand.
Your favorite thing to say is two things can be true, and yes, every GM would take Tom Wilson on their team,
which speaks to the continued and perpetuating violence in the league and no one caring about the actual health and wellness of players.
Yeah,
and instead caring about what's going to bring in money. And that's it.
Yeah, we're going to take a deeper dive into the Tom Wilson situation in a little while. But before we do that, let's get to On the Island, brought to you by DraftKings. Basketball season won't be around forever, so get in on all the action now with DraftKings, the leader in one-day fantasy sports. DraftKings is giving new players a free shot at millions of dollars in total cash prizes. Claim your free shot at millions of dollars in total cash prizes using code THPN. Playing daily fantasy basketball is simple. Just pick your lineup, stay under the salary cap, and see how your team stacks up against the competition. With DraftKings, payday comes every day for players. So what are you waiting for? Head over to the DraftKings app now. Download the DraftKings app now and use code THPN at sign up. This week, DraftKings is putting you into action with a free shot at millions of dollars in total cash prizes. That's code THPN, and you can get a free shot at millions of dollars in total prizes only at DraftKings. Minimum $5 deposit required. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com for more details. So let's talk about the previous week. Islanders played 4 games up until tonight or last night. By the way, may the 4th be with you, or if you're listening to this on Wednesday, Revenge of the 5th. 2 games.
Oh my God, you were waiting all day for that.
I was waiting all day for that. I got my stormtroopers over here above my head. If you're watching this on YouTube, and my lightsabers on my wall. You shouldn't be embarrassed, all right, bro? This is me. I love this. This is me. This is my thing. All right. This is whatever.
You do you.
Love you too.
Did you watch The Bad Batch?
I haven't watched it yet, but I've heard.
What the hell is that?
It's the new series on Disney Plus, the new Star Wars series on Disney Plus.
Oh, that was The Mandalorian.
No, that's another series. There's plenty of series coming out.
John, there's so much stuff.
There's so many things
God.
that I'm super excited about. But
I was so satisfied with I guess 7, 8, 9, right?
Yeah, because you're not a nerd like I am, and like
it was just I did all the core 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And 9 ended, and I was very satisfied with that. I was like,
deeply
cool,
invested
it's over.
In the lore, from video games to books to comic books to everything. My brother, for one of my wedding gifts, got me a thick novel on Darth Maul, who's my favorite Sith.
Is he in one
Star
movie?
Wars? He's in one movie, but there is so much more to. Well, no, technically, he's in 2 movies, and he's in 2 series.
Wait, is there are other series other than The Mandalorian and now this other one? There's another one.
There are. We're getting way too deep into these Star Wars conversations, but
there's a lot of crossover fans. People I've heard. We could talk. There's a lot of things I'm sure we could talk about.
There is the Clone Wars, which is
I think I knew that.
It's an animated series, but it's part of the storyline. There's Rebels, which is another animated series after the Clone Wars, part of the storyline. They brought some of those characters into the Mandalorian, and it was just awesome craziness that has brought everything together. The Bad Batch just came out, and that's another animated series that's part of the storyline. It takes place during the Order 66, and there's a bad batch of stormtroopers that go against the Empire, and it's just friggin' amazing. I love it. I'm here for it.
Can you see the glaze come over John's eyes?
Yeah. Well, I was trying to remember the name of the video game that I had for Super Nintendo, but it was some Star Wars game.
Battlefront.
Gotta be.
Like for Super Nintendo?
That's it. Battlefront. Star Wars Battlefront.
Yeah, I just remember not being able to get past that sand level, and that was it. That was the extent of my Star Wars video game.
Next time we hang out, I'll carry you through. No worries.
If I can find it in my shoebox of Super Nintendo games, I'll for sure make that happen.
Come for the hockey talk. Get ambushed.
Yeah, get ambushed with all Star Wars. And if you're not a fan,
I
apologize in advance. You can go hang out with John in the corner.
You know how many hockey podcasts I listen to that talk about wrestling and stuff like that? This is par for the course, apparently, for this medium. Awesome. and this topic. There are no hockey plus garbage.
Very true. But let's talk about the previous week. 2 games against the Rangers, 2 games against the Buffalo Sabres. And things started pretty well. The Islanders win 4-0 against the New York Rangers. Semyon Varlamov gets his, I believe, 6th shutout of the year. What was that? His 3rd against the Rangers in this season. He breaks a shutout streak, Chico Resch's shutout streak of, I forget what his is up to. I think it's up to 248 minutes in total, 12th longest in NHL history, and 3rd longest in the expansion era. Is that
post-expansion
era?
So after 67.
Yeah. Then they follow up that game with a 3-0 win. Sorokin gets a shutout of his own, which was nice to see. In my eyes, best forward, it was pretty obvious, was Anthony Beauvillier. He in that 2 games had 3 goals and 12 shots against the Rangers. So good time for Anthony Beauvillier to be heating up going into the Stanley Cup playoffs, which they did clinch in that series against the Rangers. However, the reason why I started the show with that rhetorical question that went a little too far, but it's okay. That's what we do here. The Islanders dropped 2 games to the Buffalo Sabres and Michael Hauser. A 6th string ECHL goaltender who was an emergency recall because of the plethora of injuries to the Buffalo goaltending. 4-2 on Monday night, 4-3 in a shootout loss tonight. Michael Hauser makes 45 saves tonight. 45. And that might sound like, wow, maybe he had a great game. because the Islanders put no pressure on the guy despite 45 shots. Those all pretty much came from the perimeter. The Islanders played Sam Reinhart and an AHL squad and came out with 1 point in 2 games. I don't know, guys. There's a lot of panic amongst the Islander fan base, and it's, of course, this is going to happen, right? This is what they do. That, they, as if I'm not part of it, but this is what we do, I guess, as a fan base. We panic, if things are great, they're, that's great, but the second they're not, that's it. The sky is falling. And we'll talk about the week ahead, but right now they sit 4th in the East Division, and listen, they clinched their spot, but I don't know, are you guys confident going into the playoffs right now? How do you feel, John? I'll start with you. What's going through your head right now after 2 losses to the Sabres?
Even the Ranger games, 3-0 and 4-0 shutouts looks really nice on paper. I wasn't super impressed with that either. They have their moments, and it's I can't tell if it's Islander hockey or they're just they're able to score some goals, and the Rangers are at the tail end of a season. Things are starting to get out of reach and they lose the games. I wasn't super impressed with them. I also didn't get to watch the entire game, either one of those games. In our what's ailing the Islanders right now question that we kind of pose to ourselves here, my issue is that when a team gets off their game, when a team gets them off their game, whether that's another team controlling the tempo or whatever, this team is just rattled. When they're rolling and they're playing their game, it's hard to stop them. We saw that in the playoffs last year. They just got on their game. They moved forward.
Right.
It took a team in the Lightning to not necessarily outplay them. I don't think anyone, maybe people outside of the Islander fan base would say that they were outplayed. But I think, they also said they gave them the best run. I think it was just the Lightning finally just derailed Islander hockey. Right. And it makes them it brings them back to earth, for sure. And even the Sabres, they capitalized on a lot of Islanders' mistakes. There have been a lot of them throughout April and early May, and that's what worries me going into the next week and then the playoffs. They need to find a way to just get on their game and get rolling.
Right. Joe, what do you think?
I'm not as worried. And I think this is coming from a little bit more of a neutral perspective here, where, I think the Islanders fan base likes to go online and, scream that the sky is falling after a couple of losses. And obviously it's understandable when you look at it at face value. This is the worst team in the NHL. So you lose 2 straight to them and questions are going to arise. But the fact of the matter is that this is a team that's absolutely 100% mentally spent. That's why you saw Barry Trotz sit Matthew Barzal tonight. That's why you saw him sit Matt Martin. That's why you saw him sit Leo Komarov. And after the game, when speaking with us, he even admitted, he said, "This team, we are shot. They're practically running on fumes." And I seem to come on this show once a month and tell you guys that this is a Islander style of play that is incredibly difficult to sustain under normal circumstances.
Yeah.
With the attention to detail, with the resolute defense, the Islander way that I'm quoting there. Now you put it in a schedule like this, and a lot more cracks are going to show.
Is that I think what Islander fans want to know, or I guess things are, the question that gets brought up is, this also happened last season. So what's the deal? Like, this seems to be post-trade deadline. I'm not sure what to call it, honestly. And they seem they drop off for some reason, and the pH is thrown off. The chemistry is off in the lineup.
And Joe, before you answer that, I want to just point out too that the major difference between last season and this season is the schedule. It was not as condensed last season, yet we saw it happen. Now, granted, there were injuries, and maybe there are some things ailing the team right now that we don't know about, but that is the one clear difference is that this year this is happening, and the schedule is definitely a reason for it. But that's not why it happened last year, and it's happening again. So, what is it that's making this happen?
I truly think that it is just a matter of this team running out of gas. This time around. Last year, I think it was, you were getting to the nitty-gritty portion of the season where you're 6 months in. And again, that's when guys playing every day are going to falter, even under a normal schedule. Like I said, this is a very hard style of play to sustain. And I don't think it was a coincidence that the team came back after a 4-month break and they came out like gangbusters and they made the run that they did.
Right.
So what is so you're saying you're not worried, but it's hard to sustain, and it's not like there's any kind of respite for them moving forward. So
not necessarily. I think that there is going to be some form of a break before the playoffs start, just because of the imbalance of the schedule between the divisions.
Right.
Where the NHL is probably going to have to wait for a team like the Canucks to finish out their schedule, and they don't want to have 2 or 3 divisions starting, say, a week before another team starts the playoffs. Okay. So I think there will be some sort of built-in rest there. Am I going to say it's this transformative break that's going to have them magically fix everything? No, I don't think so. But at the same time, I think the playoffs allow the team to refocus. Where, okay, we're not going out on an April night and playing the Buffalo Sabres or the New Jersey Devils, or we're playing the Washington Capitals, and it's regular season. It's on the line. This is all on the line, and that's when I think this system works its best. And we've seen it work at its best when it's mattered the most. So I'm not as quick to inch my hand towards the panic button.
Joe, let me ask you something, because we know the Islanders clinched that they're in the playoffs. There's no doubt. Trotz sits Barzal tonight. He sits Matt Martin tonight. Leo Komarov gets a breather. That's load management, right? Those guys are getting nights off. However, like we said before, the Sabres are a team that, minus those 3, you could pretty much take anybody out of the lineup and they should still beat the Sabres. Do you think part of this is, is the message being sent to the team like, take it easy out there, we got the playoffs coming up, don't get hurt, or is it go out there, play your game, and they're just not doing it?
I don't think there will ever be a message from a Barry Trotz led team that'll say take your foot off the gas. I don't think it would ever actually be dictated in those words. I think it might just be perceived by some players in the locker room where, some of these guys might be trying to conserve themselves down the stretch a little bit. And, again, this is complete speculation on my part. But again, you kind of go down the line, and we spoke with Anthony Beauvillier, we spoke with Ryan Pulak tonight, even Cal Clutterbuck, and they said that we liked the way we played tonight. And
it was better. I can agree with that a little bit.
Yeah,
I think my issue is that they were just so inconsistent in April. I get that it's a hard system to play on a consistent basis, but they didn't even come close to doing that. So they've had the mental lapses. These games were tune-up games. We were supposed to see, even without Barzal, I think we should have seen a much more well-oiled machine. And this is closer. Those Ranger games were closer. Again, I think it wasn't even their best, but it was closer to what we want to see on a regular basis. But yeah, I'm not panicking, I guess. And I thought, thinking about this while you were speaking, is a few weeks ago or a month ago, maybe James and I spoke on the show, and we kind of put out our expectations for the team. And I think we both settled on 4th place. like they were gonna, the Bruins were gonna come back. They'll wake up eventually. The Islanders can only hold on so long. They're playing all these, playoff bound teams. It's eventually going to come to a head. Like they can't just beat the Bruins all year. I don't think, and I wanted to look this up before the show. Joe, maybe did any team go undefeated against any other team this season?
Not that I know of. I don't think one team swept another.
So yeah, I think even the Sabres, like, they were bound to win 2 of these games. Like that, it was going to happen. I don't like that it was back to back. I don't like that it's right now, like when they could be securing that spot. And we'll talk about the playoffs.
I don't like that it was without Taylor Hall, without Jack Eichel, without their starting goaltending. That's what I don't like.
Yeah, but at the same, this is also an Islander team that lost Alex Ovechkin and missed some time this season. A lot of it was against the Islanders. I think it was at least 3 or 4 games against the Islanders, and the Islanders have lost those games.
Yeah, it was 2
This
games
is a team that plays
COVID
down
to their
opponent, and they can't be themselves for even against the Flyers in that series last summer. They faltered a bit.
Right.
I want to bring 2 things up here. Yes, you are saying that this is a Sabres roster that is comprised of 2 or 3 NHLers and mostly AHLers, or in net an ECHLer. That's 100% true. But this is also, if you just look at the philosophy of both teams, you have an Islanders team that has their ticket punched to the playoffs. They're looking at this game as nothing more than a tune-up, and you have a roster comprised in Buffalo of guys clawing and fighting, desperate for their jobs, to keep their jobs, to keep a place in the NHL. And that mindset, most of the time, is going to override the other team's mindset, the Islanders' mindset, this time of year. So again, it's obviously on the surface concerning, but at the same time, there are a lot of factors that go into this.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little different. And John, what you were saying when it comes to playing down to their opponent, you are right, because I think when the Islanders are playing a team that is a lot less organized, that they don't have the same kind of structure, and they allow the Islanders to kind of break out and control the flow of the game, that's when we see defensive breakdowns. That's when we see things getting a little looser. And that's when you see, the wheels kind of fall off. So I think when you see them, I would say a majority of the time playing some of the better teams in the division, where they don't necessarily dictate the pace of the play, but they have the option to clog things up and slow it down. That's when you see the Islanders playing their best, that counterattacking style, that slow, and I'm quoting all of the naysayers here, that boring style of hockey. I think that's when they really thrive. So it's kind of a difficult, it's difficult to describe when they're playing some of these lesser teams, if you want to call them that.
Do you think it's like, and I was trying to think of, it's like playing a video game against somebody that doesn't know what they're doing, or playing chess or something against somebody that, like, you clearly know how to play and they do not. And it's really hard to play against them because they don't have a strategy. There's nothing to it. It's just very haphazard. And it winds up being very difficult to play against when someone's just kind of like doing whatever they want. Is that what the Islanders are up against some of these teams, where they're just kind of going out there and they're just not anti-Islanders, but they're just a lot less structured, to the point where it becomes like, we don't even know how to defend against this or whatever, because they're just playing run and gun and there's nothing to defend against?
I think it opens itself up for the Islanders to take more risks, where in terms of offensive risks, where you'll see them throwing guys more forward more often, or you'll even see guys getting a little more greedy or goal hanging, and they abandon their duties inside their own zone, or they expend a little too many resources in the opposition zone, and the next thing you know, it's an odd man break going the other way. We counted a few times over the last 2 games, especially the Sabres had some pretty good grade A chances, a decent amount of odd man rushes, and that's what that kind of loans itself to do.
So we talk about what's ailing this team, and maybe it's playing down to their opponent. Maybe it's a mismatch in unpredictability, because the Sabres are a lesser team. But something that concerned me was going into this game, we knew Trotz dressed the same 6 defensemen from Monday night's game because he didn't feel that they had a good performance, and he wanted them to fix that in Tuesday night's game. So he dressed them all again. And in my opinion, that was not the case where they fixed it at all. Scott Mayfield has had a pretty tough year, and we see it time and time again where he gets outplayed. I'm not going to say outmuscled because he's a big guy, but not always the best case for him, and he gets outplayed. But even Adam Pelech had a good game Monday night. He had 2 points. Offensively, he did pretty well, but defensively, he's making some mistakes. He's taking some penalties, and he's getting, he got walked tonight by, I think, Dylan Cozens with a nifty move, and he got in on Sorokin, and Sorokin made a good save. But the defense is really what's alarming me right now because 4-0 against the Rangers, 3-0 against the Rangers the following night, and that's like, okay, that's the Islander team that we know. But now against Buffalo, they drop 2 bad games and they give up 4 goals or 3 in regulation on Tuesday.
Well, in back-to-back games.
In back-to-back games. And that's really not something that we see happen too often with, Barry Trotz. So the defense is what's most concerning to me, right? The offense, we know they're not going to score a ton of goals every night. The defense, though, on a nightly basis, doesn't give up 3-4 goals on the regular. And
are they just tired?
Nights,
are they kind of Joe's point? Do you think the defense is just tired?
Well, that's right, and that's what I'm wondering, right? You sit guys like,
and that's why I brought up a long time ago, March even,
right,
that they needed to get Hickey and
absolutely,
Aho, and now Coburn into the lineup a little more often because. Green is 38.
Yes.
Dobson has never played a full 82 game season. And the 56 games in this time period may as well be 82 game season. So you have a third pair that has never done this. And you had a Mayfield that has not played well. Sounds like they should have been doing this
a long
against
time ago.
A Devils and a Buffalo or whomever, rather. Weeks ago to get some of these, even the top pair. There's no reason to run these guys into the ground if you're playing the Buffalo Sabres, which makes it all that more concerning when you lose back-to-back games, allowing 3 goals in regulation, with who presumably will be your top 6 defensemen going into the playoffs, which there's really no good series for them. I know we're going to talk about that.
We're going to talk about it, but my question is, Trotz sits Martin, Barzal, and Komarov as a quote-unquote load management, but he dresses the same top 6. Was that the right move, or should he have maybe gotten some of those guys a day's rest?
Komarov is not load management. He took so many penalties.
Maybe.
That was just a slap on the wrist. Yeah, Coburn should have been in, and Hickey.
I think you'll see that happening over the last 3 games of the season, where you'll see them coming in. And this is just me speaking. I think when the Islanders initially acquired Coburn, I expected to see less time for Scott Mayfield, and that hasn't come to fruition yet.
Not at all.
I don't think it. I mean, at this point, it's not going to. So Barry Trotz is in a precarious situation, at least in my opinion, because the defense is practically the engine of this team. Obviously, other than the really solid goaltending that you've been getting all season, but that's also a byproduct of the blue liners in front of you. And we know that this is the identity of the team, and I think it's so imperative to keep that group's confidence and that continuity together. So I could understand if there was some apprehension to say bench Mayfield for a few games. I know Dobson saw the bench a few times. It could be a little different with a young kid, with a 21-year-old.
Just sit him. Just sit him put him in the press box for the game. There's just no reason to have.
I completely understand.
2 or 3 of those guys just taking a seat.
Sure.
If the next 3 games are, I mean, one of them is the Boston Bruins, right?
Yeah.
If the next 3 games are throwaway and it's whatever, why not just the 4th game? Like the fine line all of a sudden that's drawn in the sand, like, oh well, not on the back-to-back nights. Like, I don't know, man. I would have started with the Tuesday game and gone, especially after they lost on Monday. Just, if you're just gonna throw wrenches in the lineup and have your Ross Johnstons and your Dow Coles in there and your Zajac centering what was the first line
Dow Cole, Eberle, and Zajac, yeah.
Oh boy, that was really tough to just even read that. Forget about watch those guys. Eberle's looked terrible. Or invisible. That's terrible for him.
Mm-hmm.
I'm confused at the line. I am not, and we've said this a million times, I am not a future Hall of Fame coach. So what do I know? It doesn't mean that we can't be concerned when things are happening or question him. So I have no idea. I think the defense, it should have been not a shakeup like long term, but a pairing should have been rested for sure. I don't see any reason against it.
Yeah. So let's talk about the week ahead. They got the Devils twice and the Bruins once, the final 3 games of the season. What does the lineup look like going into the games against New Jersey? Do we see a change in the defense just for the final 3 games, or does Trotz want to roll them out again just to see if they can get acclimated? What goes on against the New Jersey series?
As silly as it sounds, I think what might be a part of the game plan is to have some semblance of your top go-to. This is our lineup that we're going into the playoffs with. Having them play at least one of these games and just having them end it on a good note. Go out there and say, win comfortably over the Devils, for example, and then, like you said, kind of take the foot off the gas again, rest the guys for 1 or 2 games, and go from there. And then, again, it's a brand new season when the playoffs start. So, you might be seeing a full strength lineup in one of those 3 games. If things keep trending the way they currently are, who knows then? It's a crapshoot.
I think in that Boston game, you see a full lineup. It's against someone that they're gonna see at least in the second round if the Bruins don't sneak their way up into first somehow, which I don't think they quite have the runway. I know they have a game in hand, or maybe even 2 on some of the teams in the East, in the top part of the division anyway. So I don't think the Islanders see them in the first round necessarily, but they can see them in the second if they wind up making it out of the first round. So they want to see what they can do. They need to bounce after those 2 losses against the Bruins in April. They definitely need to find a way to bounce back.
Just to play devil's advocate, that last game against the Bruins, and if there is any chance that the team thinks that they are going to meet them in the playoffs, would you, and this is just a question for the panel, would you not go in with the full lineup and, per se, not tip your hand, not show them anything, heading into it?
If the Islanders had played better those 2 games that they, I guess a couple weeks ago, maybe. But I think the Islanders for themselves, and this was, I think, going to be a topic in and of itself in this week ahead section here, but I think that's a really important game for them. I could be wrong. I could be overthinking it. I've had this circled for a couple weeks. No, I thought this was going to be a very important game for them because just between the ears, we can do this. We can beat a good team. This is the momentum that we need. Go out there, guns blazing, and because it's an uphill battle the rest of the way.
Yeah,
the absolute rest. And I would include these Devils games in there. There's some stuff they have to dig deep here and prove to themselves and build a little bit of momentum. That was like the word of the last show. They need to find a way to just kind of press forward with whatever lineup it is. The guys that need to get going, the Brock Nelsons and the Jordan Eberles, Beauvillier seems to have woken up a little bit. I'd love to see Pajot come on a little bit more. There's some guys that need to find some consistency, and Wahlstrom had a few, or at least a couple the last couple games or whatever. You need to see things start to roll a little bit, and I think it culminates in that Boston game, and it needs to roll on after that into the playoffs.
Yeah, I'm on the same page as you here with the Devils games being equally as important. Now, do guys need to get rest? Yes. And is that the time to do it? Absolutely. But, a few things here. One, when you look at the standings, right now they're in fourth. So if they're going to go into the playoffs as is with the standings, they're seeing the Penguins, who, quite frankly, they did not do well against this season. Now, if they can sneak their way back into third place, you're looking at the Capitals, who for the past couple of games have been without Alex Ovechkin, because Nassaumen's back on the COVID list. Samsonov hasn't been stellar. He had a good run for a little while, but he hasn't been that great. I think he was even out again in their last game. It was Vitek Vanacek in net for them. So I think that's more the matchup for them. I think that they want to try and get that matchup. And if they can, sneak into second place, I don't think first place is in the question anymore. But if they can sneak into second place, that home field advantage for them or home arena advantage for them is huge. We know what they do at the Coliseum. And you want to win those first two games. So one, I think that's equally as important. Two, you want to prove to yourself that you're an elite team, like we've said that they are before, right? The Devils have 4 wins in their last 10 games played. They're completely out of the equation. Like you said, against the Sabres, guys are fighting for their jobs, and I get it. I totally understand that. But we're talking about a playoff team versus a team in the lottery. And you want to know going into the playoffs, build that momentum, but not only the momentum, we've been talking about for weeks since Palmieri and Zajac are on the team that there needs to be a sense of chemistry. To be honest, we still don't know what the first line is. We know it's Barzal and Eberle. We still don't know what that left wing looks like. And we keep going back to Komarov. And yes, it works. But is it going to work when Crosby's out there with his first line and his troops? I don't know. I really don't know, because I don't know that Matt Barzal and his first line trumps a Sidney Crosby and his first line, or even an Evgeny Malkin and his second line.
Who's back as of this week.
Who's back, correct. So I think it's equally as important to win the 2 Devil games, because they need to start building some confidence and momentum. And then when you go into that game against the Bruins, you're ending your season that night. So what are you going to do? You're going to go off on a bad note? Listen, I said this before. John, we've said it a million times. It has to at least be a hockey game. If they lose, fine. But if they show up and they are in the game, good. End the year off on a good note. Go into the playoffs on a high note. Too often, we see them get the way they do the past 2 games against the Sabres. That cannot be the way they go into the playoffs, because I just feel like that's just going to carry itself into the first round. And you don't want to play that way in the first round. Yeah, I don't know. Am I crazy?
You're right. It's just because the Islanders played so poorly against the in the last 2 Bruins games, but then they go 2-4-2 against the Penguins, which is NHL speak for 2-6.
Correct.
And they're 2-5-1. 2-6 against the Capitals. That is not good.
No.
So I know, and I think aside from the, because I'm writing a piece about each of the possible playoff opponents, whether that's the first or the second round. The concerning stats for me in with the Penguins and Capitals is that they allowed 3.25 goals per game against the Penguins and 3 goals a game against the Capitals. The Bruins they've had a much better time with. But the Islanders have also scored the least against those teams, 2.38 and 2.25 respectively, Penguins Capitals, and the 2.71 against the Bruins. And that's probably, buoyed. And even that Capitals number is probably buoyed, that 8-4 win, and then the 7-something win against the Bruins or whatever that wound up being at the end, 7-2. Their goals against the Bruins is good, but again, I'd look more closely against, but with the Bruins the last 2 games when Taylor Hall, who's only gotten better since he's played the Islanders, his first 2 games with the Bruins.
Yep.
They're getting healthier again. Pasternak's rolling. That the perfection line's playing well. I think Raska's back. They're finding their groove they're finding their groove at the right time. I know that's a super cliche thing to say, and that's the truth, and that's ultimately what worries me right now with the Islanders.
They lost tonight to the Devils.
They're gonna lose.
That's not the equivalent to what they did to what the Islanders did against the Sabres.
It's not, because they've been playing well and dropped a game. That's going to happen. The Islanders have not played well in 6 or 7 weeks. That's the difference, and not consistently. Yeah, they've collected the wins. If this is an elite team, they need to do better at taking care of business. And this is the same thing that you hear about the Toronto Maple Leafs. There was a certain point where they dropped 4 or 5 in a row. They lost those back-to-back games against the Canucks, who hadn't played in over a month. Good teams do this. Elite teams do not. And that to me is the difference. I know that might not be something fans, particularly of the show, want to hear, but elite teams do not do this. The other night, on Monday night, when you said 100% for sure this goalie out of fucking nowhere gets this win.
I called it.
I called it. The fact that wasn't even a hot take, or Joe and I were like, "Yep,
it's expected."
Yeah, the ability, and I tweeted this: the Islanders' ability to amplify NHL debuts in any capacity, goaltenders, forwards, defensemen. It doesn't matter who you are. You could have one arm and no skates, and you could still, for some reason, score a hat trick or shut out the Islanders. It's going to happen, and that's what happened last night. Hauser is not a one-arm, no skates goaltender, but
you could tell he's not an NHL goalie.
He's not an NHL goalie.
Little things. I'm no goalie expert. You can. There's little. This wasn't a taxi squad goalie, or something like that had played pretty or Keith Kincaid, right, where he had a lot of time in the A, but he looked really good with the Rangers.
Right.
I think a lot of third string goalies looked really well. They played really well this season. This guy was just putting himself in front of the puck.
Right.
And it felt 2 NHL wins, 2 NHL games. I'll take it. That's more than who am I to critique it? But but I think the difference is, between all this stuff is good teams, this happens to. Elite teams, you drop one every once in a while. Are the Islanders elite? I don't know. Not right now. Not this season.
Moment. Now, I do want to pan out for a second. We have been doing a lot of Michael Hauser hating just because of who we are and what we're talking about. But I want to
hate. I'm jealous that the Islanders.
Wrong word.
What was it? 2009 or 10 or whenever they had like 8 goalies play.
Right. Al Montoya,
close to Mike Dunham, goaltending coach, dressing for them in his old Devils gear.
Yeah.
They couldn't get a win. Anders Nilsson, Al Montoya, Nabokov, Ron Hextall came back. I don't know. He played, but you know what I mean? Like, it was just like they just went through these guys.
A carousel.
it was a carousel. They couldn't get a fucking win.
Right. But I do want to zoom out and just say congratulations to Michael Hauser. It is a pretty incredible story. It's unfortunate that it did have
James Nichols, noted Sabres fan.
Yes, I can't wait to cry when they trade Jack Eichel to the New York Rangers. But I do want to congratulate Michael Hauser. It's an incredible story. 28 years old, been through the ECHL. He signed an NHL contract this season. Emergency recall, signs an NHL contract for what is now 2 games for the Sabres. 2 wins, and he has about 70-something saves overall, and it's just good for him. It's a feel-good story. It's unfortunate that it had to come at the hands of the New York Islanders, but we'll see what happens next week. A lot to prove, in my opinion, for the Islanders. A lot to prove for not us themselves in that locker room. So we'll see what happens. Before we move on to the possible playoff opponents, though, I wanted to ask Joe, because nobody's listening to us, meaning John and I, when it comes to the roster and what's the problem here. So often I have people tweeting at me, it's Palmieri's fault. It's Zajac's fault. When they came, this team plummeted. Do you believe that, Joe?
No.
Why not?
What are your alternatives right now? Honestly, I'm not really sure. And again, this is a whatever. This is an irrational fan base looking for somebody to point the finger at. And that's the thing. The Islanders didn't give up anything huge. They didn't give up a piece that was directly contributing to the roster this year for these guys. It was filling a need. It was who's going to be a replacement for Anders Lee. And granted, Kyle Palmieri has not had his fair shake of getting the opportunity to play on that first-line left wing spot.
Very true.
And also, he's coming into a situation that, again, is completely fluid. Both of these guys are coming into a situation where you have set roles for so long on an organization, regardless of how much it's struggled over the past few years. But now you're coming on a good team. You're coming into a brand new environment. You're playing the structured hockey that has its onus on defense and lets the offense fall by the wayside most of the time. And then you're going to ask them to come on here and play on different lines and play in different positions. I think that's pretty unfair for fans to do that. And I see all of that stuff that they tweet at you, and you're a glutton for punishment too, because you ask for them to ask you questions. Good for you, because you're a stronger man than I. I should say more patient. But to say that it is Palmieri's fault and Zajac's fault is a stretch. Would we like to see more from them? Naturally, but to put them in a actual situation where they can build up and contribute instead of just coming into this new environment and throw them directly into the fire and say, okay, good luck. I don't know. That's a bit of a stretch for me. I think there are more fingers to be pointed elsewhere.
Is there a disconnect? And these questions for both of you. Is there a disconnect between Trotz and Lou? And I ask that because Lee goes down. There's a quote unquote, we need to find a quote unquote replacement for him. Lou goes out and gets a Palmieri. Trotz has not tried him. Maybe once. I'd love to see the minutes played on that first with Barzal, at least Barzal, on 5-on-5.
I mean,
that had to have been a conversation, right? I mean, to a certain degree, Lou did not need to go to Trotz and go, do we need to replace Lee? Like, that wasn't a question. That obviously was something they needed to do, right? Like, they didn't even need to talk about it. But then Lou goes out and gets the piece. And what Trotz does is, now strategically, to a certain degree, I understand. He's like, oh, well, we need possession. Zajac can win draws. Let's get him out there. It didn't, I guess, yeah, he won faceoffs, but that's about as far as it went. Nothing happened after they got the puck. Some of that's on Barzal and Eberle. They're not blameless in this. But to not have tried Palmieri last night against the Sabre, those are the games to do, like we said last week, your lab games, your quote unquote lab games, where you're just playing mad scientist as a coach, and this is when you can figure things out. What two line, your bottom six is working, whatever that third line was made up as, and kind of move on from there. What are your first and second lines? What kind of different amalgamations can you kind of like put together there? And they just like haven't done that. The solution was to just go back to Komarov and not try. Is there a disconnect there?
I don't think so. And Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there is, because
I'm not saying like the world's falling down and these guys are going to break up and it's going to be this mess, but like there seems to be a miscommunication or something to me.
I don't think there's a disconnect here because, first of all, who were your options at the trade deadline? You had Taylor Hall. You had
I'm not talking about not getting Palmieri. I'm talking about literally how the lineup is. You do that trade every day.
Right. You do that trade every day. And I think that it starts with the trade deadline, right? The obvious answer was to acquire Palmieri and Zajac or someone like Taylor Hall, but they went ahead with Palmieri and Zajac. I don't think there's a disconnect there because I think they have the same thought process with go with the guys who have been there before, go with the veterans. And that's who Lou got, right? You constantly see Trotz playing the vets over the rookies. Wahlstrom plays way less. Dobson plays way less than any other forward or defenseman on the team. If Trotz was not on the same page as Lou, I think you might have seen Oliver Wahlstrom playing on the first line by now.
Yeah, but Palmieri's not a rookie.
No,
that's not answering the question.
Correct. My what I don't understand is I don't think there's a disconnect, but I just don't know what the conversation is in the room with them too. With okay, I got Palmieri and Zajac, and Trotz turns around and goes, "Yeah, I'm gonna put Zajac on the first line, and Palmieri's gonna stay on line 3." I'm not sure what that is, but I don't think there's a disconnect there because I think that they agreed that this is the way it was gonna be.
Like I said, I think there's an agreement on that's who you get, but the on the ice product of it all, to not have at least started Kyle Palmieri on that line, to just be like, "Yep, this is the offensive punch," or at least like a few games in or something.
Yeah, this is. I can understand why you're asking that question, and I just want to cite back to last season when the Islanders got JG Pageau, where both Lamoriello and Trotz came out and said, at the trade deadline, we went through our list and we identified our targets together. We said, who is going to be the best potential fit? They came to the consensus that JG Pageau was the perfect fit, and for the most part, he has been exactly that. I would like to think, given their track history and at least from what I know, how the line of communication is always kept open between the two on all matters. Building the roster, potentially even lineups, to the new arena. It's all out in the open between these guys. So I do sincerely believe that both Trotz and Lamoriello came together, spoke about the prospect of acquiring both Kyle Palmieri and Travis Zajac. And I think since then, and at the time of their acquisitions, they discussed what their roles would be. I think Lou Lamoriello is too hands-on of an executive to just simply get these two guys and say, all right, Barry, go ahead. And it's Barry Trotz, don't get me wrong, where if there is a coach where you would just say, okay, go ahead and just throw your trust into it, it would be him. But at the same time, if there was a certain amount of unhappiness that was coming from Lamoriello on how these two guys are being utilized, at this point, I think it would have been addressed and the two would have had at least discussed it, and then you would have seen Palmieri on the first line a little bit more.
So, Joe, do you think that Lamoriello is dictating lineup decisions?
No. Nope.
I think they're having conversations about it. You're probably right. The Trotz is not operating on an island with his coaching staff. It's definitely Lou is definitely on those calls to to a point.
Where I think at the end of the day, the power to set the lineup ultimately comes down to Barry Trotz. But I think, again, he's leaving his ear open for suggestions from Lou Lamoriello.
I think what worries me a little bit about Palmieri is that he should at least be a half point per game player.
Sure.
That's what he's just been throughout his career, or a little bit better. I know, and I even pointed out 7 or 8 games into the Zajac Palmieri era with this team that it took Peugeot 7 games, the last 7 games of the regular season. He scored 2 goals in 2 games. He fought Trouba. It was this whole thing.
Yeah.
And then he came alive in the playoffs. They had a week or whatever, 10 days as like a mini training camp. I forget how long it was at this point. And then they came back. Palmieri's had 13 games. Like at what point, I'm not saying the experiment doesn't work. I'm not saying don't re-sign him next year or anything like that. But something's got to give before, you just got to find out what works. And that's the only thing they haven't tried. They tried him next to Nelson. They tried him next to Peugeot. With 3 games left, and they're kind of important as far as the chemistry of the team and the momentum of the team. If you're not trying it now, you're not just going to throw them up there. We haven't even seen it late in the game. Like, we almost have not seen it at all. I don't think the playoffs are the time to test things. It was the last 2 nights and the next 3. It was like the last 5 games of the season. That's kind of, to me, and maybe they're both too on the same page and then set in their own ways, and that's why it's not happening. They just go, I don't think it'll work. I don't think it'll work either. And that's just where it's at. It never evolved from there. And they're both just, old school part of the, 200 hockey men in the league. And that was it. It literally didn't move beyond that.
John, you're absolutely right. I think that at a time where it feels like, especially from fans on the outside looking in, that the franchise is basically just throwing spaghetti on the wall and seeing what sticks. Why not give this one a shot? And I think that would, at least you're covering all of your bases heading into the postseason, where you can definitively say, instead of speculating that, it's just not going to work, or I don't think it's going to work, put it out there. Give it a shot. Honestly, you just lost 2 straight games to the Buffalo Sabres. You can't go much further down. You can't stoop much lower. So
the alternative is literally trying Bellows and Del Cole and Komarov and Zajac. Like, I don't know. Are you really putting Lee on that level? Former 40 goal scorer who scores pretty much 20 in his sleep every single season. You think that the replacement is Zajac? Okay. Again, not an NHL coach, not a Mite coach. So I have no idea. So it still seems odd to me that you're not. I'm not saying line blender, but your middle 6 has been a disaster. Is very inconsistent. I don't know. If you're just trying to find a guy that's going to ride shotgun with Barzal and Eberle, just do it. Like, go with your gut and just, I don't know. You have guys in your middle 6 that can carry you. Bailey aside, and I guess whoever is going to be, that other left wing spot. But you have Beauvillier, Nelson, Peugeot, Wahlstrom. That's 4 solid forwards in your middle 6. And if you're looking for complementary players there, you throw a Komarov in there, you throw fine. I can almost live with that. You still have Bailey, who occasionally doesn't aggravate every single Islanders fan. That's fine. You can live with that. Put some firepower on the first line. So, and it's not like you don't have depth still. I don't think you're taking any depth away by loading that first line up a little bit. He's not, and to be frank, I mean, Barzal and Eberle have not been playing well, and Palmieri's not played well wherever you're putting him. Okay, it's literally the last thing. You have not tried that. That's it. I'm not saying you throw two things together that don't work, but if you tried all the other combinations, it's worth a shot for a period. Even like, I don't know.
Yeah, that's gonna have to be something that they figure out in the literal last three games of the season going into the playoffs, because the Islanders of the four teams going in probably have they definitely have the weakest first line out of all four teams going into the playoffs from the East. So
even with Palmieri on that line, how consistent Barzal has been,
sure, and
how much of a ghost Eberle is until overtimes and late third periods in the playoffs, that's still weak.
Yeah,
it's definitely not the strongest. And
right.
The Islanders are more than the sum of their parts. They're a 4-line team, though that fourth line has not looked great. And maybe they're just tired. They're, aside from Cizikas, who's our age and I refuse to call old, the other guys are not young.
Right.
And they have some really hard miles on them. Everybody else in that lineup is good to go.
Right.
I don't know. They've been there before. This is, they're a veteran team. This is the third year in a row they made the playoffs. They've won multiple playoff rounds since 2013. They've made the playoffs quite a bit. This isn't an inexperienced squad anymore. There's not a lot of excuses. This is starting to be like the Tampa Bay Lightning or the Blues or the Sharks or the Capitals those years. They're building up to just be like, they're either going to be the Capitals and win the Cup eventually, or the Lightning, or they're going to be the San Jose Sharks.
Oh gosh, two ends of a very big spectrum.
But those are the answers. You either win a cup, and then you can kind of continue to build on that momentum, or eventually you just find it doesn't fucking work anymore, or you don't, and it just keeps going downhill. This unless you magically have this renaissance like the Colorado Avalanche, where they were pretty good in the mix, terrible season, bounce way back. I don't know. For the Islanders, there's not that many kicks in the can with, Nelson's getting up there. He's got a contract, but he's not going to get better. So there's some guys that they, in the next little while they're in their prime and while things are cheap, they need to do it. And that window on the cheap side may have closed a little bit with Beauvillier. Then now you need to re-sign Sorokin. That's not necessarily the case with him, but you still need to re-sign. Some of these guys, I don't know. This roster may look kind of different in 2 years, just because. But maybe we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. Let's just deal with the next 3 games.
That's a good way to start. Good place to start. Is just those next 3 games, and I just want to put this out in the universe here. Because I think it's important.
I didn't look at your co-star today. I don't know what's coming.
No. I
didn't look at your horoscope, so I don't know what. You're putting things out in the universe.
Yeah, that's a completely different podcast for.
We're not qualified for that. Not any more than this, anyway.
Yeah, I need my wife. I can't do that by myself. You look at the Islanders back, in the dynasty days and the pre-dynasty days, leading up to the dynasty where they were one of the strongest teams in the NHL in, 78, 79. They had something like 111, 116 points. They went all out in the regular season. And they kind of learned their lessons, and they were humbled, whether it was the Maple Leafs or the Rangers. They kind of found a way or taught themselves to kind of conserve things in the regular season. And this is, and I'm not trying to compare the two. I'm just putting this out here in the universe to maybe put as a future talking point in case this actually does come to fruition. But you look at the Islanders' first Cup year, when they won the Cup in 1980, they had 91 points. They were 11 games over 500 in the regular season. This wasn't, they weren't barnstormers. And yes, obviously, 81 and 82, they were undoubtedly the best team in the NHL. But again, these guys with a lot of miles where, the end was, those prime years were coming to an end. You go to 1983 and they're a 96-point team where they're 12 games over. I'm sorry, 16 games over. Modest. But they knew when to turn it on in the playoffs. They knew how to win and they knew how to get it done. Part of me thinks that if there is ever a coach to replicate this, and I don't want to sound whatever you want to call this, homerish or fanboyish or whatever, but if there is somebody who could kind of crack this formula, you would think it would be Barry Trotz. So I really think that it's still, we're not going to really see the true product until the puck drops in game 1 of the Eastern Division semifinals, whatever you want to call it.
You heard it here first. Islanders setting themselves up for their first of 4 Stanley Cups.
Oh my God.
I don't know.
Joe
That's all that I heard.
But I just wanted to put that out there because, there are teams historically that were, these video game teams where they were regular season monsters, like you said, like the Sharks. And then they would just run out of gas in the postseason when it mattered the most. So there's a formula to all this. And again, we can't crack it. And I want to say before, John, I really appreciated you saying that you're not a goalie expert because I've seen so many kids on social media trying to act as experts.
I have no idea who you're talking about.
No. There's a lot of kids out there where they're trying to break down X's and O's of professional, goaltenders and scorers and. Listen, yeah. I get paid to do this, and I still won't do that. I refuse.
Right. Sometimes it's clear, and it's funny when I did coach. Granted, it was at the club hockey level in college. I would point out to the team all the time, and we'd go to the D3 games with SUNY Oswego, which is of all the Plattsburghs and the Mercyhurst and all in the Norwiches of the world, that's pretty good hockey. Right. There was a couple, if anyone remembers Eric Selleck from a few years ago, he was a SUNY Oswego guy, a man against boys at that point. He was an absolute monster in this league. But anyway, I would sit there and say, just so these are the mistakes that you make are also the mistakes that happen at this level and at the pro level. They all go through these things where they need to work on certain aspects of their game and their breakouts and their regroups and things like this. I've said this a bunch of times this season. The Islanders have looked the best on neutral zone regroup that I've seen. They're poised. Their defense knows where the puck's going to go. The offense is comfortable with putting the puck there. They're finally starting to get to know where each other are, which I really think is important. But that's all to say, kind of to your point. No, even as a former coach and someone that has studied the game, no, I don't pretend to know all the things. It was pretty easy to see, on a couple times where Hauser's stick is off the ground or to his side or something like that when he's in the butterfly. I'm like, okay, that's probably not normal. Wouldn't recommend that. That's not exactly covering your 5-hole there. And just other little movements, it just didn't look professional. It just looked like he was trying to get himself in front of the puck, and some of that's probably nerves and all of that. But yes, not an expert.
I was a 3-time gym hockey all-star at Farmingdale High School. You don't see me giving Brock Nelson scoring advice.
Yeah, I used to do the Michigan in my driveway in 1997, but that doesn't mean anything. I was killer at street hockey and won a 10 and under championship at that sports arena in Smithtown. That doesn't really. I'm not giving advice to anybody.
You should listen. I've I've scored in a video game a couple of times, so I think we all know I'm the expert here.
Hey, there it is.
I did go to the Junior Olympics for roller hockey.
There you go.
Did you really?
Yeah,
you're more of an expert than any of us.
I got my gold medal in somewhere. It's here.
I'm surprised. How are you not wearing that right now?
I should just wear it around. Oh yeah, my AAU, because everyone even knows what that is. It would take so long to explain any of that. Yeah, my 14-year-old self, half my life ago. I do remember going to Hooters after we won.
Oh, all right, cool.
I also remember, and this is good for this audience because I tell this story sometimes, and because this was 2 weeks before Katrina in New Orleans, that we did this tournament. So we won the thing, and we have this big cup, and we're walking down the street and back to our hotel, and this guy comes up to us. He was like drunk or something, and he's like, "Oh, you guys must be pretty good, like that guy Bob Gretzky." And we're like, "Yeah, dude, Bob Gretzky." So we're like, "All right, Bobby or nope, Bob Gretzky." Just combine the two of them.
Oh my god!
And yeah, he loved it. He was stoked that he said that. And even at 14, that was the most ridiculous thing I'd heard.
Incredible.
I can't wait to see that gold medal on eBay next week. But
absolutely not.
Let's talk to let's talk about the possible playoff opponents going in. We know the East Division is locked in: Penguins, Bruins, and Capitals. It's pick your poison at this point, but who do you guys want to see in that first round? Who do we think that the Islanders have the best chance of getting out of the first round and moving on to the second round against? And I'll start. I think that the Caps might be the least healthy of the bunch, but even with Taylor Hall on Boston, I think that they're the most appealing of the trio. Despite them being,
say again, Boston is who you want.
I think Boston is who I want to play. Despite the fact that it's not vodka. They're 7-2-1 in their past 10, and I get it. And Taylor Hall's been really good for them. Even Curtis Lazar has been really good for them. But I think their defense is the weakest of the bunch. It's Charlie McAvoy, Matt Grzelcyk when he's healthy. Occasionally, Mike Riley, who they got at the deadline, has been doing well for them. But after that, it's a crapshoot. I think that they're the weakest of the three.
Joe, you go. I have no idea.
It doesn't matter, and I will tell you this in all sincerity because we've seen this year that the Capitals and the Penguins have provided the Islanders with a fair share of headaches. On the flip side, these are two teams that the Islanders have beaten in the last 2 years in a playoff series. There is a certain bit of confidence that would come with playing either of them, but at the same time, there is also the realization that this is going to be an absolute slog if you play either Washington or Pittsburgh. Now, at the same time, Boston is a team who, again, if this was last year, you would be swearing up and down that you would not ever, ever, ever want to see them.
That's what I'm saying.
Now, the only problem with Boston is, yes, their defense is probably the weakest of the 4 Eastern Division teams. But do you trust the Islanders' offense enough to keep up with the perfection line and company, which now includes Taylor Hall, who is playing much better hockey?
Yeah, who's the other guy that's playing really well that they picked up? Is that
Lazar?
Smith?
No, Craig Smith's been with them for the past 2 seasons, I believe.
He woke up.
Former Penguin. He's an Islander killer. But here's my thing, right? We talk about how the past couple of weeks, once we get to the playoffs, it's not going to matter for the Islanders, right? They've been playing horrible, doesn't matter. Well, the same could be said for the Bruins. And we've seen them 7 times. We've beaten them five times, right? We won 5, lost 2. Frankly, I think that they have the best chance of defeating the Bruins in the first round. They're not as big and bad as they used to be, man. They lost Krug. They lost Chara, which now he's with the Capitals. You see how well he's doing for them. He's almost in like an Andy Green type role for them, but it's working. And I think it was a big mistake for, even if it was just this year, to let him walk. I think the Bruins wanted to, let the quote unquote new regime of the defense take a step forward this season. And I don't think it has. I think McAvoy's been great, but other than that, again, Grzelcyk can't stay healthy, and they just got Mike Riley, who's been good. But other than that, who is it? And if Taylor Hall is not on his game, and the perfection line is having an off night, who else do they have to, make up for the difference? So when you look at the Capitals, TJ Oshie's going to score. Nicholas Backstrom is going to score. Evgeny Kuznetsov is going to score. Oh yeah, Alex Ovechkin's on that team. John Carlson was almost he almost had the most points in the NHL as a defenseman last season. Like, it was ridiculous. So, and then you look at the Penguins, and it's like they make goal scorers out of loose leaf paper. It's ridiculous. They can just acquire a guy, stick him on Crosby's wing, and they're gonna succeed. I think the Bruins are the way to go, and not that we have the choice, but that's the preferred matchup in my eyes.
And that has more to do with the Bruins moving up than the Islanders. I think are in fourth place.
Even if they win out,
I think it has more to do with where the rest of the division falls, just as much as it has to do with the Islanders.
Right.
I mean, each team has its own. You make the pros and cons list, like you said. I think the Islanders have a formula, at least, to, where they've done it recently, where, okay, they know how to beat the core of the Penguins in the playoffs. They know how to beat the core of the Capitals in the playoffs. And then obviously they can hang their hat on what they did in the regular season against the Bruins. So, yeah, like I said, I don't think, at least for me, there isn't one team I would choose, because you're obviously picking a pretty potent amount of poison with whatever decision you're making.
Right.
So really, it's just it's from an Islanders fan perspective. I'm speaking for them, at least. This is just a tough draw where you find yourself in the toughest division in the league, and whoever comes out of this absolute rock fight is obviously going to be looked at very favorably by the rest of the league. So
right.
You're going to wind up playing two of them.
Yeah.
There's just whether if you're really just looking at who do you not want to play? Which two do you want to play? Because that's ultimately what you have to look at it somewhat positively.
Yeah.
I think despite what the Islanders have done against these three teams this season, Joe, your point where the Islanders have figured it out against the Penguins 2 years ago and swept them, and pretty handily shut down the Caps last season. Granted, they knocked Backstrom out of game one. And that they've retooled a little bit. They have a Mantha, they have a Char on the back end. The goalies are pretty solid for them. I think they can still manage to kind of figure that out too. I feel like those are the two that I'd want. I don't know what order. I don't think it matters, but I think I'd point in that direction, just knowing that, as you said, the core of those teams are pretty much the same. The Islanders figured out how to beat both of them in very recent memory. And I just want to disagree with Jay. So,
well, think about it this way, right? They figured out the Penguins in year one. They figured out the Capitals in year two. So what's left for them to do? They're going to figure out the Bruins in year three, but we'll see what happens. Not too sure who they're going to match up with yet, because nothing's set in stone for the final 3 games of the season. I think the Capitals have 4 and the Bruins have 4 as well. Penguins have 2 games, so a lot can change. We'll see what happens. But for now, let's trek off of Long Island and head to around the rink. A couple things to talk about. First being that Tom Wilson incident that we started to discuss earlier. We kind of know where we stand on this, right? Terrible sequence of events where, he sucker punches Pavel Buchnevich, and it ends in him also shoving Artemi Panarin's face down to the ground, to the ice, and you know, he gets the fine, $5,000, and off the bat when I saw it, I'm like, that's it, he's done for the season, and with his repeat offender history, I could see them giving him, the playoffs too. Like you're not going to play. But he gets a slap on the wrist, in my opinion, $5,000 for, he, again, a repeat offender. Now, if this wasn't his first offense, sure. But this was a probably the most violent I've seen him get, aside from a pound for pound fight. Hitting a guy blindside and then dragging another guy's face down to the ice. That's extremely dangerous. And I know it's a little dramatic to say, Artemi Panarin's going to miss the rest of the season because of this, because it's only 3 games, but that's not the point. The point of the matter is, yes, hockey's a violent sport, but post whistle, you're not supposed to put somebody's face in the ice. I don't know. What do you guys think about this?
I said this earlier today when the ruling first came down, and it's what makes you and me and all of the fans who are listening and watching, it makes them lose respect for the NHL. Somehow Tom Wilson, after everything that he did, received a fine that was only $3,000 more than the fine that Matthew Barzal received for being illegally hooked and falling down.
That's insane to me.
It's insane. And it's why the system is completely broken, and why the NHL player safety, whatever you want to call it, is a farce.
Do you think that has anything to do with, they're getting close to the playoffs, and do they see Tom Wilson as a figure who needs to be in the NHL playoffs to, I don't know, sell seats and TV ratings?
I don't think selling seats. I think that it's close to the playoffs. I think that the Capitals are gutted as it is, where they're dealing with their litany of injuries and COVID positives and disciplinary reasons, like Samsonov. That's why he didn't play a couple nights ago or last night. So I don't know. If this was the middle of the season, I think you'd see a suspension. That's just me speculating again. But in the same breath, I really don't know. This entire thing was. Think about it. It's you're taking the Buchnevich part was bad enough, where he basically sucker punched a guy with his glove who was on his stomach on the ice, just completely wide open to getting hit and getting hurt. Right. But the Panarin thing was so disturbing because he takes a guy by, he takes off his helmet, he pulls the guy down by the hair, and then he's slamming him onto the ice, helmetless. This is, and you can call it hyperbole if you want to, but he could have really seriously injured Artemi Panarin.
Right.
And the fact that the league is just glazing over it, and just grouping the two in this fine, the entire system is just completely broken. And I saw something on Twitter where they said just rename, and shame on me, I forget who said it, but this is not mine. But somebody wrote, somebody needs to just rename the Department of Player Safety to NHL Internal Affairs.
That was Suicide Pass.
Thank you. It was just the NHL is just looking out for its own brand at this point. It's greedy, it's selfish, and I don't know. They're looking at this guy as a polarizing figure where, you know what, he's going to get the needle and people are going to turn these games on to hate watch and whatever you want to call it. But this guy's just not good for the game at the end of the day.
The short answer to your question, Jay, is yes. The NHL cares more about keeping violence in the game as part of its core product than they do about the health and wellness of those involved. Period. Your hat that you're wearing currently, the Violent Gentleman hat, yes. My understanding that George Peros, the head of player safety, has a hand in that company.
Yeah, I think he's one of the owners.
Anyone else surprised that Tom Wilson slammed a guy's head into the ground and he went, "Oh, we got to do something or someone's going to think something's up." And they give him what the equivalent of a $48 fine to a layperson with a regular salary. Not me. Not this guy. That's, and I think, and I thought about this earlier too, and I tweeted about it. This isn't just the NHL or player safety or the officials. I put some of this on the NHLPA and individual players. So because the NHLPA, this is, the maximum allowed in the CBA is not a one-sided conversation. They want players in the game. They always negotiate to make sure that the suspension or fine is less, but they fail time and time again to consider the player that was hurt. Why are they not defending Panarin's health and wellness and safety and saying, no, one of our own tried to injure very on purpose in a not hockey play? This isn't a hit. This wasn't an on the edge play by somebody. This was an after the whistle. Yeah, I want pushing and shoving as much as the next guy. Part of my Neanderthal brain just wants to see a fight sometimes. And I'm trying to grow out of it. I get it's part of the game. Actually, Steve Valiquette had a great little segment on MSG following the Ranger Capitals game the other night. It made its rounds on Twitter. If you have not seen that, go watch it. He calls Wilson an idiot. He says, "Can I say that on TV?" It was kind of funny, but it was he was very well spoken. John Scott also came out and said something. He had a very good thing again,
which is a big deal.
Which is a big deal. So I'm not surprised. This seems on brand. It upsets me that the NHLPA and the players don't stand up for the Panarins and the Buchneviches that get hurt and say, no, yes, Tom Wilson is part of this union and this and that. But he also tried to really hurt somebody. And so I put this just as much on those two entities as much as I do as player safety, the NHL, and the officials for not throwing him out of games before, for not protecting players and not calling penalties in a game, or a roughing call when it's very clearly something else. I don't think he was. I think he played later that game.
He was part of the game-winning goal.
Scored.
He should. The fact that he
scored the game-winning goal.
I know he scored. I'm not sure if it was the game winner, but
the fact that he wasn't just simply thrown out of the game, I don't understand. This is not, and I think as an Islander fan, we're somewhat subjective here because we play the Capitals quite a bit and we know what kind of impact when Tom Wilson isn't being a complete goon, can have on the game.
But the Rangers are also our rivals, and
this also wasn't a game that involved the Islanders. So to come out and actually have an opinion about this to some degree, I don't know. It's I wouldn't like this if it was the East. If Ryan Reeves started doing this shit, I wouldn't like it much either. I would say the same thing.
And then you have, the Capitals win the game. And how about the tweet following the incident where the Capitals pretty much praised Tom Wilson? Now, it was later deleted.
Oh, I saved that.
But plenty of people saved it, and it'll never be forgotten. That's a bad look. And I'm, again, that's an intern running the Capitals Twitter account, but
good takes never last, bad takes never die.
Exactly.
That's not an intern. That's these social media people. They are employees of the team, and this is a whatever you want to call it. And it's not, obviously, it's not the organization itself. It's not the organization's leadership. But this is the culture that's surrounding the team that is suggesting that they are completely fine with being the heel. And that's a problem.
Right. And you wonder if there's going to be something that comes about with that tweet, if the NHL is going to address the Washington Capitals. But the New York Rangers addressed Tom Wilson and the league, and they put out a statement that they were extremely disappointed with the fine, and they were disappointed that it wasn't more. And they even went as far to say that they think that George Parros should resign. It's a pretty big statement coming from one of the top grossing teams in the NHL.
That's a lot of they have a lot of balls to do that on a couple levels.
And I'm like proud of them.
Well, so that's the thing. So there's, so they say this when it's one of their own players and this and that. But during when they should be making statements about social impact issues or whatever the hell else is going on, they seem to just forget where their keyboard is. But as soon as it's this, now it's George Parros needs to resign it and this and that. Meanwhile, one of their own players, they just kind of quietly stuff in a cabinet somewhere or under a rug when, is all this other stuff's going on. It's phenomenally ironic. It is just deliciously ironic for them to have all of a sudden they just have the gall to have this kind of opinion. Fuck them. I like that they did it, but fuck them.
Wow. What I'm most worried about, and what I think will alienate a lot of fans if it does happen, is if the league fines the Rangers for these comments. And if
more than $5,000.
If that sum is more than $5,000, yes, that's a problem.
Right. If the Rangers got fined for their comments, but the Capitals didn't get fined for their social media tweet or post, that's a major issue right there. And there's so much that the NHL needs to sit down and discuss as far as, now the NHL is not going to start managing tweets from personal teams. Be like, okay, you can and cannot do this, but the fact of the matter is, like Joe, like you said, this team was okay with the fact that they're the heel of the NHL and they're internalizing it, and that sends the wrong message to everybody. It's more we're okay with our players trying to deliberately injure other people.
Like it's one thing. Like after the game, they talked to Peter Laviolette, and he was like, "Oh, this happens. It's a scrum." He's obviously going to defend his player,
of course.
Just like Barry Trotz defended Tom Wilson back in the day too.
Of course.
It's what it is.
He still does. He did it even recently.
Of course.
Which is, oh my God, I just don't understand.
Right. But that's one thing. But to say that, the Capitals have chosen violence, and then they say that, Tom Wilson's living rent-free in the heads of hockey fans. No, Tom Wilson is a problem. And it's a topic that concerns a lot of hockey fans who ultimately want what's best for the game. He's a great hockey player. And like we said earlier, it's, there are two things and they don't always have to correlate. Tom Wilson's a good hockey player. Tom Wilson's also a goon who ultimately is not good for hockey. And
look at the Raffi Torres or the Matt Cook or Brad Marchand. Which one of those guys is still in the league?
Right.
Change his game. He's one of the top scorers in the league. He's like 467 points in 300 and some odd games, which is ridiculous. Like as of some date.
If the worst thing that Tom Wilson did was lick somebody's face, we wouldn't be talking about this. But this is far beyond that, and it's a problem, and
it's a league problem because this is their product,
right?
And they wonder why they can't get new fans or the league's stale or anything like that. If you explained this game to new fans and you're like, oh, this just happens, that's somebody's first game. Somebody watched their first game and that was it, and nothing happened. And they just go, oh, yeah, in hockey, you just can do this crazy stuff.
I'd argue that would draw fans.
I don't know. This doesn't happen in other sports.
Exactly.
I don't know.
And they're more popular. Do you know?
I'm not advocating
the
for
NHL,
this.
In the United States, the NHL is the 5th biggest sport, or lower.
Okay.
You got to be kidding. That's no.
Right.
Absolutely not. We don't disagree that much on this show. Absolutely fucking not.
You don't think that there's an
wrong.
audience of people out there that are like,
I'm not saying there's not an audience.
That.
I'm saying you're going to fail to grow the game.
Oh yeah.
And that's what's going to happen. There are Neanderthal hockey fans, many of which apparently are Capitals fans, because they're like, in the 90s, no one would have been batting an eye. Actually, we did, and we changed it. If, as a matter of fact, a lot of people internally in the game, not fans, wanted to change the game, and they did.
Right.
That's why you get guys like Paul Correa that haven't touched the game in over a decade, because you don't want something to do with it, because they don't care about him. If you didn't watch that TSN documentary, that 10-minute like interstitial thing, devastating. I just feel, and not just because he was my favorite player, one of my favorite players. It just, it's tough to see a guy like that very clearly cared about the game and was so fucking good.
Right.
No, they're never gonna. They're wondering why their product doesn't grow, or not as quickly as other leagues. And we complain about salary caps and how it's so much lower than other leagues. This is the only league that kind of puts up with this stuff, and tradition for tradition's sake leaves you in 5th place. I put it behind like NASCAR, which is probably the most popular, or next to football.
In all honesty, I mean, you're watching a sporting event at the end of the day for entertainment, and you have your alignments with your favorite teams or whatever you want to call it. But when something like that happens, and I've seen it before, and I've seen colleagues and friends and family members where, why would you watch something like that to the point where you get so irate and so angry because there's no punishment to fit the crime? I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's the whole thing is baffling to me, to the point where it's just, you ask yourself what it's going to take. Where is it going to take a Todd Bertuzzi incident again to get this guy out of the league? Is it going to take something that awful?
I hate to quote this guy, but Larry Brooks, there was a comment like, how many inches away was Panarin from like dying?
Right.
I don't know if that's dramatic, right? He could have just like straight up hit his head.
And that's the argument. Like, again, like I said, Ryan Whitney posted a video of himself saying, "Oh, everybody's crying over Tom Wilson," but you have to think of the humanity aspect of this. Like you just said, and you could say this to Ryan Whitney's face and be like, "Dude, I get it. Hockey should be a physical sport, but post whistle scrums, yes, happen." Not to this degree. His head, 1 or 2 inches the other way, could have caused one serious injury where, I don't know, maybe he ends up as a potato for the rest of his life, or 2, it could have killed him. So it's not far-fetched to say that crazier things have happened.
It's not. And again, I think the big thing here is, if I was going to talk to Ryan Whitney, it is what about Panarin? You just don't give a shit about that. You'd rather Wilson. I mean, look, and I don't want to get political, but this is the same fucking stupid logic bullshit from a certain segment of the country, that the logic all of a sudden just doesn't fucking apply. Where it's like, oh well, it's about Tom Wilson's right to do this versus the health and safety of other people. You gotta be kidding me.
Right.
And it's the same. And Ryan Whitney is absolutely in that stupid ass segment of the population. So yeah, that doesn't, in today's day and age with people just spouting absolute nonsense. Yeah, that about lines up with everything else. I know this, we try not to get too political and all, but yeah, that lines up with everything else that goes on. That's exactly the same thought process. And he's absolutely in that camp, that show and that network and all that stuff. It's absolutely in that line of thinking.
We call that whataboutism.
Whataboutism.
Right.
Whataboutism, and
I like it.
I don't know.
It's more about protecting the guy who did the thing wrong and making sure that he doesn't get raked over the coals, instead of just absolutely kind of ignoring the fact that a player is injured and it could have been worse. And that's only one of the incidents. The Buchnevich part, like we didn't even talk about that.
Right.
So the fact that there were 2 incidents on the play, part of the, and I saw a Wyshynski tweet about this actually, that the NHL didn't find, I think I read it. They didn't find that he pulled Panarin's hair, and that was the cause of it. And I was like, so you agree he slammed him to the ice? What's the difference if he did it by his hair or not?
Right.
That's the line?
The most asinine thing that I've seen throughout all of this, because again, you fall down the rabbit hole when you spend too much time on social media, which unfortunately is the downside with this job, and being in this business. It's that there were so many people that were saying, "Oh well, Panarin shouldn't have jumped on Tom Wilson's back. He's trying to pull the guy off.
He's trying to defend his teammate
of his teammate. Yeah, right. He's trying to pull the guy off of his teammate
from the other animalistic thing you did before that."
What are these people? What are these people looking at?
Correct.
Emily Kaplan had a good tweet. I don't know if you saw it. She said,
Kaplan.
She said, "I understand why people are upset and confused over no suspension for Tom Wilson, but here's how the Department of Player Safety saw it. The quote, fall on Buchnevich isn't much. The punch is what Wilson gets fined for. Everything after, 2 guys wrestling, happens every night. It's not wrong." Oh God, this is like a lot of the other things that you can say about things that are going on.
It's just that's a super zoomed out view of it.
I don't know that it is, because it's the same logic as a lot of other things that are going on in today's day and age. We're like, well, it was by the book. Yeah, change the fucking book.
Right.
That shouldn't be what you're basing it on. And
that's what I mean. Zoom in a little more and you see the little details there. And you see, well, yeah, 2 guys wrestling, but at the same time, the intent to push his head to the ice was there. Whereas instead of, 2 guys tussling and they happen to fall and hold on to each other, it's completely different. 2 different things.
Yeah, and it's there's too many good parallels for current events that are going on, but it gets this literally the same thing.
Yeah,
without going into it.
We're going to move on from this. We're unsure if anything is going to come of this, if there's going to be any follow-up to
ice cold take. Nothing is happening.
Yeah, I mean, that's very possible, but, we'll see. The Rangers put out a late statement. We'll see if anything follows up from that. We'll see if anybody raises a stink about the Capitals tweet or anything, but let's end the show on a more positive note. And let's talk about Connor McDavid. And every time somebody or a group of people say, well, is he still the bona fide best player in the NHL, right? Nathan McKinnon came real close last season. No. McDavid said, forget it, because you know what? I have 91 points in 50 games this year, 30 goals, and I have 6 games left to play. I'm probably going to hit 100 points. That's insane. 56 games, 100 points. Are we kidding? This is insane.
It is 100%. You are right. Absolutely, completely insane, incredible. What division is he playing in?
That's true.
What is the competition that he's playing against? I don't want to be that.
You still have to do it.
Exactly. You have to do it. Right.
Is the same argument with like Gretzky's playing with a team of Hall of Famers in the 80s.
Right.
He can still be the best player of all time. You could also recognize the time period.
Right. And you say what division is he playing in, but what team is he playing on?
He is he's stirring he is the drink.
It's the Edmonton Connor McDavid.
He's the straw. Oh, it's Connor McDavid and the Oilers.
And McDavid, Draisaitl, and the Oilers.
Right. And I mean, again, we look at it, and what is it? The North Division, they have 2 teams that have 60 points or more. I think every other division has 2 teams that have at least, 2 teams that have at least 70 points. So
right. Yeah.
But again, with that being said, it is still an incredible feat that he's doing. It is, a man against boys, and he deserves all of the accolades that should be coming his way, including another MVP trophy. There's really nothing else I could say about the brilliance that is Connor McDavid other than I wish that more of his games were televised here so I could actually.
Very true. And it's funny because you say, what division does he play in? And that brings to mind, who's the leading goal scorer in the league? And it's Austin Matthews. He's got 39 goals this year. He's about to hit 40 in the next couple of games, which is still an outstanding feat. But now that you've said it out loud, what division does he play in and who is he playing against? Things are starting to make a little bit of sense. The bricks are starting to fall into place there in the old noggin for me. I'm like, oh, well, that's it's definitely impressive, but you definitely have to consider the talent, right? Because if you put Matthews in the East Division, or if you put McDavid in the East Division, it's pretty likely their numbers are not as inflated, correct?
I don't know.
We'll see. Honestly,
he'd be on a better team, so he'd have guys around him.
Maybe that's also true.
Maybe he still does it.
Yeah,
and then some.
That's also true.
That's the thing. I think. And the scenario will undoubtedly be different, but the only thing that could be seen as a litmus test is what happens next year. Where,
right.
The schedule will be, hopefully,
hopefully
normal. And
who even knows what's going to happen next year?
Exactly, but he has to, he has to come and play, the Islanders twice a year, or the Golden Knights however many times a year, or the Wild. The best teams of the Western Conference.
Yeah,
he's got to meet and they got to play and he's got to try and keep up with. So, again, guy's incredible, and he will be the best player in hockey for the next 5 or 6 years at least.
Just to use the same logic that we applied to the Islanders, where when they were winning all those games in a row, it's like you can only play what the schedule says.
Yeah.
So next year is next year, and that could change. He could just not play well. That's completely fine. The Oilers could just straight up suck. That's also a possibility. And not to diminish anything that McDavid is doing, because this is a very different era. But looking at Lemieux's stats, 89-90 in 59 games. Well, I'll ask you, because I doubt either of you actually know the top of your head. Closest to the pin, 59 games, 89-90. How many points did Lemieux have?
Jesus.
How many games did you say?
59, which is pretty comparable to what we're
59 games. He had 110 points.
Joe, what do you got?
89-90.
89-90. So this isn't quite like the I have there's the 92-93 season, which was one of the highest scoring seasons.
This is all right. So this is before the Penguins back-to-back years. I'll say he had 90.
Jay gets it. He had 123 points in 59 games.
Wow,
which is bonkers.
Yeah.
In 92-93, in 60 games, he had 160 points. Granted, this is on the heels of the Cups. This is, again, the season that Turgeon and LaFontaine and everybody and their mother had over 100 points in that season. Not taking anything away from that, but that's just the way that it goes. So, I think people were trying, not comparing, but saying this is like one of the best seasons. Really, I think 02-03. Lemieux came back, or whatever, he had 91 points in 67 games. So this is like one of the best seasons really since any one of those Lemieux seasons in such a short period.
Right.
And now, of course, you have me looking this up now. He played in 59 games and he still finished 4th in the NHL in points.
Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah.
That's gross.
That's most of his career, is he led the league, and just like well, that was like 2000, 2001. He just like gets up off the couch, scores 76 points in 43 games. He's like, I think they can use my help. I'm gonna get out there or lace him up, and then he's like, I got a few more years, and then 91 points in 67 games in 02-03
as a 37-year-old.
As a 37-year-old, this is pre-Crosby.
On a bad Penguins team.
This is him in that ridiculous Nike helmet in that era. And that whole, as much as I love Nike equipment, what a mistake that was. But yeah, it's just, you're comparing McDavid, I think, to someone like this because typically he didn't have a whole lot of help around him. He was kind of on this island. He had Yager, I guess, which
I guess.
But for the most part, it wasn't like Crosby with, and he had like a whole team and whatever. I think the Penguins are still obviously really good, those back-to-back Cup teams, but yeah, I think that's the only comparable right now. Like 100 point, if he hits 100 points in 56 games,
he's going to, in my opinion.
I don't know how many games do you have left.
6.
Oh shit, he can score 10 points in 6 games.
He needs 9.
And they're sitting him in the third period of games. Like he
doesn't
last
matter.
few games, like from what I've understood, he's not played all that much.
He needs 20 minutes for one period.
He had 4 points in less than 19 minutes against Vancouver the other night.
That's what I'm saying. He needs 20 minutes. Not even. He needs 15 minutes a game. He'll get it done.
He had 4 points against Winnipeg in 16 minutes.
That's what I'm saying. He's got it. It's done.
That's insane.
He has 5 games. Are we counting tonight? He's playing right now.
Is he playing? Oh, he's playing right now.
He has 2 assists.
Okay, there you go. So he's up to 93. He's up to 93, and he'll have 5 games remaining. He's at 93 at least. He'll have 5 games remaining.
And 3 of those 5 are against these very same Canucks, and then 2 against the Canadiens.
Oh, okay. He's breaking.
It's in the bag. It's in the bag.
That's incredible.
He's going to end with 101.
That's a good number. That'll do.
101. He's got it in the bag.
So his second season in the league, he had 100 points in 82 games.
And I
don't care who you played the entire season.
It's pretty darn good.
That's still an incredible pace.
Absolutely.
That's like boys. That's the Islanders' entire top 6.
Yeah, that's
like combined.
Yeah.
Or maybe not that. Maybe the first line. Depending on who that is. Komarov just scored his first goal of the season a few days ago.
But he's playing on the first line, dude. First line Komarov. To the moon.
I hate that so much, but
all right, boys. That's about it for us tonight. Bit of a long one, but we hope you enjoyed it. Thank you to the Hockey Podcast Network, the Hockey Writers, and of course, all of you, our listeners. Please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to or watch the show. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Nassaumen Hockey, and find our work at the Hockey Writers. And you can find Joe at Joe Pantorno on Twitter for a wide variety of sports coverage, including your very own New York Islanders. Until next time, everybody, let's go Islanders.